Hello, thank you very much for taking a moment to watch this video. I'd like to present our main findings and recommendations from a recent report on the future of regional development and public investment in Wales, United Kingdom. This report focuses on the effective governance of a place-based approach to regional development and public investment in Wales and its importance. The report was undertaken at the request of the Welsh Government, and we began it in January of 2019. Most of the research was completed by the end of 2019. So that means before the January 2020 Brexit vote in Parliament and before COVID-19 turned our world upside down. But I do believe that our findings and our recommendations remain as valid and potentially more valid than ever. One note on Welsh government in this report: we are regarding it as a national government, as one of the UK's devolved nations. So we do understand that the range of powers and capabilities can be limited. I would like to take this time to present a few territorial considerations that went into the report and that I know Wales is considering strongly itself in its policymaking, some of the key findings and the recommendations from the report, and then a short conclusion. So the territorial considerations. Among the territorial considerations that we really looked at were disparities in labor productivity and growth. And we see this on the map on the left of the UK. Labor productivity levels in Wales, so in the southwest of the country here, are still among the lowest in the UK, and they are below the average level of the Northern and Western European OECD regions. And this is despite the fact that there is a positive average productivity, and we see that in the blue bar to the left on the graph on the right. So even though there's an average level of productivity growth in Wales, about half of Welsh regions show very low productivity growth, and in some cases negative productivity growth, which means that productivity is not evenly spread through the territory. And that this divergence of productivity, or this diverging productivity, is one of the factors that may be driving low economic performance in Wales. Now, not all hope is lost. There are some very practical measures that could be taken. For example, investment in high performing transport networks in Wales, increasing the skills of the Welsh workforce, or investing in more R&D and innovation. We also gave consideration to disparities in well-being in Wales, and well-being is a cornerstone of Welsh public policy. And what we see is that compared to OECD regions, Wales performs in the mid-range in 11 material and non-material dimensions of well-being. And we see that Wales is the little yellow dot, and we see it in this horizontal gray band. But what we also see is that when we compare Wales to other UK regions, it performs less well in a number of different aspects, particularly in income, education, health, and life satisfaction. So this brings me to the map on the right, which highlights income deprivation and COVID-19 deaths in Wales from the 1st of March to the 17th of April. And what we notice is that in the most disadvantaged or deprived areas, Wales registered around 45 COVID-19 related deaths per 100,000 people. And yet in areas with less deprivation, there were 23 COVID-19 related deaths per 100,000 people, so about half. Now, yes, density can be a factor, but as we know now with our experience with COVID, fatality rates can also be determined by health system capacity and by pre-existing conditions. So high blood pressure, obesity, diabetes, and often these pre-existing conditions can be correlated with income and education. So here, part of the purpose for highlighting this is the value and the need to really consider a territory in a place-based manner and what's happening in different parts of the territory. We also gave consideration to EU funding. And what we see, and what this chart highlights with Wales out here, is that for the 2014-2020 programming period, Wales received the highest amount of EU funding per capita among UK regions. So that ensuring Post-Brexit, ensuring that public investment funds are optimized and supported by effective governance and financing structures is going to be fundamental. And this is also going to become accentuated in importance post-COVID, as recovery and resilience packages can require significant subnational investment. And finally, we gave consideration to devolution in Wales, but also we can't separate it out from the UK. And what we see is that fiscal devolution in the UK remains rather low. We see that as GBR in the little red dot in the lower left-hand corner of this chart. And basically what this is highlighting is that the UK's 3 devolved nations account for a low share of total public spending when you compare them to other regions in the OECD and the EU. Now, what we see from the UK to Welsh level, we also see from the Welsh level to the Welsh subnational authority level, or to the Welsh local authority level, where fiscal devolution is also unbalanced between the decentralization of spending responsibilities and the decentralization of revenue responsibility, revenue generating capacity. So the issue here is that by limiting revenue devolution, there is a potential for loss to growth opportunity. So these were the territorial considerations that we spent a significant amount of time exploring in the report. And they led to some key findings and some recommendations. And what's important here is that to manage these disparities, to address the fiscal and financial constraints, there's a strong push and need for quality and effective governance in order to manage these and to address or to meet large-scale regional development and public investment objectives, such as minimizing regional disparities. So among the challenges, I think one of the key challenges is fragmentation. And there's fragmentation in regional development policy and in public investment financing for regional development. What we see is that there are lots of pieces to a puzzle that are not necessarily coming together. In terms of policy and plans, Welsh government departments or sectors have a series of plans, have their own policies and objectives, some of which have a regional dimension to them, for example, in transport, economy, energy, environment, tourism, etc. There are also the city and growth deals, which bring together the UK government, the Welsh government, and groups of local authorities for specific projects and growth opportunities. There are the regional economic frameworks, which are a new framework for economic development planning between the Welsh government and local authorities, and then a host of local level plans from education to transport to spatial planning and well-being. There are lots of plans. Investment financing is also divided among a minimum of 4 strands. Department budgets, the EU funds, and eventually the Shared Prosperity Fund from the UK, the City and Growth Deal funds, and local authority budgets. Now, fragmentation like this is not unusual, so Wales is not alone, but it does require effective coordination and management. And this is where our recommendations focused. They focused on developing a single and unified regional development policy for Wales, one that is integrated, that has widely agreed upon development objectives, and that is formed by bringing together the various sectors with a regional logic. It's important to do this ex ante, and it's important that this policy rests on a broader strategy for what Wales wants to look like in the next 10 or 20 years. And that this policy should be complemented with regionally designed development plans. Investment financing also can be better coordinated, and coordination for public investment financing is a large challenge across OECD countries and regions. And we encourage the adoption of the Welsh government's proposed framework for regional investment. It builds on existing knowledge, on existing experience, and on existing capacity for managing large projects and high levels of funding. It has some very clear priorities and objectives that are stated. And this is the opportunity for Welsh government to adjust what doesn't work, such as high administrative burden, to make sure that processes are clearer and are more simple, and to introduce stronger outcomes-based performance measurement. And finally, the last main recommendation in this governance section for strategy was improving the coordination of regional development policy and public investment at the center of government. We are seeing increasingly center of governments are taking a stronger role in policy and objective coordination and evaluation. And so we feel that creating a sector neutral office for regional development and public investment under the office of the First Minister, so at the center of government, is going to be fundamental. And it should be sector neutral so that it can work across sectors and it can work across levels of government. Now, the other aspect of fragmentation, so the other challenge coming from fragmentation, is in policy and service implementation or policy and service delivery. You can have the most beautiful policy, but if it falls short in the implementation stage, the policy is going to be much less effective. And what we see in Wales is that there are a large number of actor sets responsible for delivering on regional development policy and programming and services. This ranges from the national and local governments to city and growth deals, to city and growth deal boards, to partnerships and committees. But what happens is that while there are a large number of actor sets, the implementation and the delivery is spread among a very limited number of people in a complex geographical pattern. And so what this does is that it puts a strain on national and local resources and can lead to missed opportunities. So what the report recommends is focusing on implementation capacity in three aspects. One is building strength in numbers, taking a concerted approach to introducing effective and resourced intermunicipal cooperative bodies to build scale and make the most of service delivery and investment opportunities, because there is strength in numbers. The other area is to better promote learning by doing. And this is going to require changes in capacity and in culture at the Welsh government level and also at the local authority level. But it's important in order to build a knowledge base of local authorities, to encourage pilots and experimentation, to engage in formal partnership agreements or other types of deals in order to effectively deliver on more responsibilities now and over time. And finally, what cannot be forgotten are local actors beyond local governments, but actors such as the private sector, the third sector, civil society, because they support policy implementation as well. And we have recommended to Welsh Government to reconsider a regional development agency in order to support subnational actors identify and act on growth and investment opportunities. So finally, I think one of the things that this report has done has highlighted this notion of a changing role of government, particularly when we're looking at decentralized or devolved contexts. We have been seeing that with decentralization or devolution and more working at a regional level, the national government or the national level is taking a step back from a traditional role as a policy and service provider and shifting into a higher level strategic role as a policy and service guider. So they are strengthening their capacity to set strategy, to ensure that priorities across government align, that objectives are clear and that they're met, and that performance measurement that is outcomes-based takes place. They're also supporting subnational governments implement their responsibilities. But what this means is that the subnational level is also becoming more empowered in terms of planning and programming and investment, in terms of delivery decisions, and in terms of day-to-day implementation. So success depends on all levels of government being able to learn and embrace new functions, and on making sure very practically that roles and responsibilities are clear, mutually understood, and agreed upon. But most importantly, it depends on looking at each other as partners and taking a partnership-based approach. And I think that these are all areas where Wales is moving towards. So with this, I would like to thank you very much for your attention. And I would like to thank the Welsh Government for the opportunity to have worked on this very interesting project. Thank you.